this is the management console. What we're gonna go ahead and go to the IAM dashboard. So let's just oh, you say indeed, Chris? I don't know. He's business sarcastic. Okay, okay. I thought that indeed that he's that doesn't have any knowledge of the management console. Okay, let me go ahead to IAM. Okay, so we are here in IAM. I have multiple things to show you here. One of them is the alias, right? So this is an alias that I created, and this is for any IAM users that we have. So here we have my information here. This is my name, and this is the alias that I created. So as you can see, it's very meaningful because it pertains to these sessions, right? So this is something that you copy and you give to every single IAM user because that's the signing URL for IAM users in this account, right? So that's something that I want to show you here. Also, I want to show you this section here that is telling me that I have to add MFA to the root user. So some of the best practices is to add MFA to every single user, including the root user, right? Also, this user, Dunieski, does not have any active access keys that have been unused for more than a year. So that's good. It has a check mark, right? But I don't have access to permissions for billing, cost management, and account consoles. So that's something that we need to do in this user, right? Now these are the user groups, users, roles, policies, and identity providers. I don't have any here. And inside here I have the user groups, users, roles, policies. And I have a question for you guys. I want to make this interactive. And just give me an answer in the chat, right? You don't need to come off mute. But can you please tell me, other than MFA for root users, are there any other IAM best practices that you know? Or maybe you tell me some of the things that I'll be doing today, right? But other than having MFA or enabling MFA for every user, including a root user, are there any other best practices that we should follow? Well, we have here disable root account, a principle of least privilege, okay, remove programmatic key for root, okay, rows, rows, rows. Now that's good, Chris, right? Now, I'm gonna step back a little bit and ask Alicia. Alicia, what do you mean by disable root account? What do you mean by that? Because that's a little confusing to me. What do you can come off of mute if you want, but that sounds kind of confusing. Can you please elaborate on that?
I think I read it that you should disable the root account. I'm not
Okay.
100% sure about that.
Hmm.
But I'm kind of I don't know why I have it on the back of my head that I've read that before.
Yeah, yeah, you're pretty close. You're pretty close. Um, and I saw that Sergi. Is that how you pronounce your name? Sergi? Is that correct?
Yeah, you're doing fine. Almost
All
like
right.
native.
Yeah, Sergi. Good, good. Sergi, you said something similar, right? Something similar to Alicia, but you said it in a different way. What do you mean by remove programmatic key for root?
So the best practice is to delete any and all of the root's programmatic access keys. So that's what I'm referring to.
So you're saying all of you say root, right? Is
Root
that what you
root's
say?
programmatic keys, if any available.
Okay, good.
Because root has,
So,
root access, meaning that you got the key from the kingdom, and
mhm,
if your programmatic key leaked,
right.
God forbid it, so you kind of screwed,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So, do you guys notice the difference between what Alicia said and what Sergi said? There's a big difference, right? So, Alicia, I know that you have the idea, right? But probably you said it in a way that you didn't want to say it, or probably that's what you understood, right? But you never disable the account root, right? You disable the keys of the account, the root account user, right? The user, not the account, right? So why? Because if someone gets access to those keys, you get access to a lot of information and a lot of permissions, right? So, the root user is like the super user, is the user that is created when you create the account. So you don't want those keys in the hands of the wrong people, right? That's why we have to either disable them or delete them, and then use IAM users just like I'm just living by example. I'm the first one using an IAM user here with administrator access for daily life activities, right? Okay, so we have another good practice here. Rotate credentials between 60 and 120 days. Okay, that's a strong password policy, right? So that's the best practice. Have a strong password policy. That's why you have certain policies here that you can follow, and then once you have that, then you can go ahead and force every single user to have specific uh, specific settings in their password, right? Like this here, we have a password policy here. This account uses the following default password policy. I haven't changed the password policy, right? So I haven't said what I want, right? This is the default one. So I haven't said I want certain number of characters, or maybe the password length requires at least one uppercase letter, or maybe at least one lowercase letter, or at least one number, or at least one non-alphanumeric character. These characters here, right? So I can turn on password expiration, put a date here, just like Sergey said, 60 or 120 days. You can go any dates from one a day to 1,095 days. So probably 3 years, most likely, right? And also, a password expiration requires administrator reset, right? Or allow user to change their own password. I can check this here and allow our users to change their own password, or I can force them to send me an email or contact me so I can change the password as an administrator, or prevent password use, or I can say I don't want you to use the 10 last passwords, right? So just use your hard drive and remember that you use one password long time ago before the 10th password, and you can use that one, not anything else. So you want to, one of the best practices, you want to have a strong password policy, right? Any other good practices that we can remember? Any other good practices? Security. Well, is okay. Well, IAM has to do with security. IAM is one of the security services in AWS, right? Okay, don't use root account access every day. That's good. That's why I'm using an IAM user, right? Especially for production, right? If you're developing, well, you may not have any problems if you're developing. You just have a testing account, right? Or maybe a development account, but you should always use the IAM users instead of root users. Okay. Strong password for root access as well as any counts. Okay, that's good. So far we have don't use the root account, disable the keys for the root user, use a strong password. Any other practice? Any other good practices that you guys remember? Well, I have a question for you. What is better? What is best practice? To have to create an IAM user and attach a policy to that user, or to create a group attach a policy to the group and start adding users to the group. Which one do you think is better? What do you think is best practices? Groups. Good. None. Sergi, what do you mean by none? Groups over users, roles over groups.
Right, but
Okay.
don't we have that best practice where we create not IAM users, but rather we kind of doing federation with the whatever we have instead, and assign and create the roles per
Yeah.
whatever requirements for job.
Yeah. But okay, that brings me to a question. What's the difference between a role and a user, and I am user? Because I mean, we cannot neglect I am users. Roles, they have their particular purpose, right? But not always do you use roles, right? A role you can impersonate for a
You
period of
can
time.
assume a role by user, but user is the entity, so does role.
That is correct. That is correct. Okay, you can grant assume roles because it is easier and less error prone to manage groups of people, resources performing a role so that they can use or be granted that it is to manage. Okay, that makes sense, Chris. But remember, a role is permanent. It's something temporary, right? A role is it has its purpose temporarily, right? Even though the roles exist in the account, its purpose is temporary, right? So someone comes to the company to edit, to audit your company, right? And then the person's going to stay there for, may say, um, 2 weeks auditing your company, right? Do you think that you will create a user for that person or a role? So what do you guys think?
Say it again.
Okay, a person is coming to your company to audit your company. It's going to stay there. It's going to work with your company for 2 weeks. What do you think is more appropriate, a role or an IAM user?
Well, it depends how that person is going to log in, though. So if there is no way
Mm-hmm.
to log in but I am user, that you need to have both. If there is a way to log in
Mm-hmm.
somewhere else, you should create the role with appropriate permissions and assign that and add that user to the role.
Right. So you can create an IAM user if you want to, but I think that you're kind of overkilling it. You don't need an IAM user if that company is going to be temporarily, if that person is going to be temporarily working with your company. So what
Right.
is more
Oh,
appropriate is to use a
yeah.
role,
You
right?
can create to
Hmm.
what's the name of what's the right name? Trusted access, cross account access, and enable user to
Hmm.
assume the role in your account, and that's pretty much it.
Right. But cross account access is when you have two accounts, right? You only have one account here, so you don't need cross account access. You just
Yeah,
need
that's
to what you said to
th-
create a
that brings the
role.
that brings to the
Yep.
question how what credentials is going to be used by that user.
Correct. Correct. So maybe the user is coming from another company that has an account, and then you can use cross account access. You can have a role that allows the user to access the account temporarily. But
Mhm.
my point is that a user is permanent and a role is temporary, right? So that's the big difference. And you have users for people that work for your company, right? People that are already in your company, like staff, employees, right? Or you can have a temporary permissions for a particular person that comes to work for the company for 2 weeks, right? Good, good. Roles are good because you're bypassing credentials. Right? You don't need credentials. Basically, you're giving a person or a service temporary permissions. A role creates something that is called a role session. And as long as that session is active and alive, then the permissions are there, right? But there's a session where the role finishes what it's doing or the session expires, then the role has no more effect. Otherwise, another session is open. So that's what happens with roles. Roles are temporary, right? Now, yes. So the best practices when it comes to IAM users is to first create
Can,
a
can
group.
can I ask a question? I'm sorry for
Yeah, go ahead.
interruption.
Go ahead.
So when you
Go
say
ahead.
enroll are temporary, what does it mean? Role are not temporary. You create the role and it's there until you delete it. But
No,
can you assume the role? Yes, you can assume the role temporarily as long as you are
right,
allowed to do so.
right. But it's what I said. The role you created here, it doesn't
Uh-huh.
leave, right? It doesn't leave, right? It's still there. But
Right.
when you use the role, a session is open, right? And the
Got
session has an expiration. That's why it's temporary, right? The permissions are there always, but when the role is assumed at a particular time, let's say that an I easy to instance fetches the data from S3, right? A session is open because the EC2 instance goes and gets the data or the objects from the S3 bucket. And then after that, the expiration happens, and then the role that doesn't have any more effect until the EC2 instance goes back and gets more uh, data from there, from the S3. So behind the scene, there's a session that is open with the role. But it doesn't mean that the role disappears and it's not here anymore. The role is still there in the console. You create the role. But it's not the same as a user that is permanent. A user you can use anytime, anywhere. It's just something that happens in the back end, Sergi. It's something that we're not monitoring consciously in our minds, something that we're thinking about it. It's just that it's happening behind. And I can send you some information about roles versus users, and you see that one is permanent and the other one is temporary. Right? It's like I said, if someone comes to the company for 2, 3, 4 weeks, is not going to be there permanently? Why should I create an IAM user? I create a role with the proper permissions, and that's it. And the person can log in and access the account temporarily, right, for 4 weeks, right? And okay, so best practices. You create a user group, right? Let's create a group here called developers, right? This is the group, developers. That's the first thing you do when you have many users. Can you imagine if you have 25, 30, 35, 120 users, and then you have to attach policies to them directly? That would be very, very, very tedious. So what do? We create a group called developers, right? And in the developer groups, we can go ahead and maybe, I don't know, our user policy, probably, and give that user is a developer, so this developer needs probably access to everything except IAM. So the power user policy, what allows users is to do everything except work with IAM. Like you cannot create IAM roles or IAM users or IAM policies, but you can do everything else, right? So that is a power user. So I create the group, and now I have a group called developers, right? These developers, if I click on this and I take a look at permissions, I have the power user policy attached to it, but I don't have any users yet, right? Let me go ahead and create a user. So we see this similar to a file system hierarchy. So we have a folder, and then inside the folder, we have files, right? But if you attach permissions to the folder, every single file inside will inherit the permissions from the folder. So the easiest way is to create 100 users and add the users to the developer group. And then we have 100 developers inheriting the power user policy that we attach to the group. As easy as that. And then if the person is either fired or laid off or the person leaves the company, what do we have to do? Remove the permissions from the user? No need to, because the user had never permissions attached to it directly. The permissions are attached to the group. So what we do is just remove the user from the group, and that's it. As simple as that. So that's one of the best practices. Let me create here a user called developer one. Developer one. Okay. Now, do I want this developer to have access to the console? Yes or no? Well, this is optional. Let me say yes. Right. Are you providing console access to a person? Yes, I want to create an IAM user, right? And the IAM user is going to have a custom password. That's one that I want to put here. I don't want to generate one. I can show the password if I want. Now, I also have the option to create a new password at next sign in. I don't want that. I don't want this particular user to reset their password when they log in for the first time. And when you check this, you automatically attaching this I am user's change password policy to that user, which means that they can reset the password uh, when they sign in for the first time. And of course, when they want to change the password, remember that all of this is in line with the password policy that you have, right? That's very important. Now, next, what are we going to do now? Well, we're going to add the user to the group. This can happen at this time, or it can happen when I finished creating my user, right? I'm going to do it now. You see, I'm going to add it to the developers group, and I'm going to hit next. So now this is the time when I review and create the user. So we have a developer one user being created, being added to the developers group, right? Which already contains the permissions. And we are giving this particular user access to the management console, right? So we create the user. Now it shows me here the password. Just for you to remember the password, I can return to the users list. You can download it if you want to as well. I'm going to return to this dashboard here. As you can see, it tells me that I belong to this group. And if I click on my username, I see that I have the administrator's access policy, right? And oh, this is Dunieski. Oh, I was scared for a moment. That's me, right? When I click on developer, so I have. Do you see? My permissions are automatically added to me because I belong to a group that has those permissions, right? And you see here, attached via developers, right? My permissions are attached via my developer, the developer group. So if I ever want to leave the company or if I ever want to remove this user, the only thing that I have to do is delete the user. That's it, right? Delete the user. Now, from the console, you can simply remove the user. If you do it from the CLI, you can't remove. Well, things change in AWS. I don't want to give you wrong information, but last time I checked, you're not able to remove a user without removing it from the group, from the CLI. So first you have to remove the user from the group and then delete the user. But that's from the CLI, from programmatic access in the CLI. From the console, it's pretty easy. I can just go here, select the user, and delete it. That's it, right? Well, as you can see here, this user has been added. Okay, let me create another user, and I'm gonna call this user maybe um, no access user. Okay, is a no maybe no access no. I don't want to say that no permissions user. Just a simple name, right? I'm gonna give this user permissions to the console as well, and I want to create a custom password for this one too. Now, I don't want this user to um, create a new password net sign in. So I'm going to do next. I'm not going to add this user to any group, right? So I continue new next, and then I create a user, right? So I have now two users that I created. One is non-permissions user and developer one, right? This one has no permissions whatsoever because it's not, it wasn't added any policy and it was not added to any group that has certain permissions, right? So what I'm gonna do now is try to access and test this, but I don't have to test this with management console login, which I'm going to do, but I don't have to because I have something called the policy simulator right here that allows me to evaluate my policies and determine the effective permissions for each of the actions that you've specified. So let me go ahead and click on Policy Simulator. And then here, I'm going to select the developer user. So the developer user has power user access. Let me go ahead here and select just amplify, just an example, right? And let me go ahead and run the simulation. Let's see, I have a lot of allows here. Remember my power user, right? Let me see if I can maybe look for IAM and see what I can do with IAM. So I have IAM here. Let me see IAM and access management. Let me go ahead and run simulation. Well, I have to select an action. Let me say all. So as you can see, I have a lot of denies, right? I have one allow here that allows me to create a service linked row, which is makes sense. It makes sense because this is not something that I usually do. This is something that is created for me. Let's just imagine that we create an elastic load balancer, and in the backend, a service linked role is created for me, right? And that is what allows the load balancer to interact with the EC2 instances. I don't have to give permissions to the load balancer. So that all happens in the backend for me, right? So not necessarily do I have to create a service linked role, right? That's why I get it now. But if you take a look at this, delete certificate, okay, I can delete certificate, but I cannot do anything with IAM, right? Like create users, create policies. That's why I have this. Let me go back to the other user. Let me just take a look at no permissions user, right? Let me deselect, well, let me keep this selected. Why not? Because I'm testing the same thing. Run simulation and I get a lot of denies because I don't have any permissions. So I have zero permissions. This is the principle of no privilege at all. No privilege, right? So let me go ahead and select another service, anything that I want. Let me select Amazon Connect. Okay, select all actions, and I get deny, deny, deny. That's pretty obvious, right? So let me go ahead and log in as this user. So I'm gonna grab this URL here, right? URL here. I'm gonna use an extension that I use for opening the same browser in the same I'm sorry, open the same account in the same browser, which is not possible if you don't have this extension, right? If you try to open an AWS account on in the same browser, when you click here, it's gonna log you out of this one, right? But we're gonna go ahead and log in the same account with multiple users at the same time. So let's do that using this extension here. So I'm gonna go ahead and say, okay, I'm gonna use this one. Okay. So I want to copy this right here, paste it, right? And I'm gonna access this as developer one, right? And then I'm gonna enter the password that I have. So I'm logged in as developer one, right? Perfect, developer one, as you can see here. And I'm gonna log in as the no permissions user. So I'm gonna go ahead and open another container here, and I will use the same URL. And this time, let me take a look at this guy here. The name is no permissions user. So I'm gonna go ahead and paste it here, and then go ahead and enter the password, and I'm logged in. Okay, so I'm logged in as two different users, right? I don't like the name of the container. I should change this to something else, but this is something that I used before in a different demo. So I have here the developer, and I have here the no access, no permissions user, and I have here the Dunieski as well in the same browser, right? Which is pretty cool, right? So let me test developer one. Developer one has access to everything. So I can go to CloudFront. I don't get any API errors here. If I click on show me the policies, perfect, perfect. Let me go to probably, let me go to S3, and in S3, I get all the buckets. That's perfect. Let me go to anywhere else, whenever I want, CloudWatch, and I don't get any errors, no API errors, right? Right? Everything is fine. But let me go to IAM. So let me try IAM. I'm gonna click here IAM, and I will try to create a user. Let's see what. Oh, access deny, access deny. Oh, a lot of access denies here. This doesn't look good, right? I get scared when I see this red thing here. I don't like it, right? So I cannot get account summary. I can't. I cannot list MFA devices. I cannot do a lot of things. List access keys. I cannot list any groups. No users. No well, roles. I can see the roles. That's fine, but I cannot create a role, right? And policies. I cannot see policies. So that's how much access this user has. Only for developing. You can do anything except IAM, right? Now with this no permissions user, let me go ahead and click on Athena, right? Just Athena. Let's see what I can do with Athena. Well, launch. Oh, you're not authorized to perform Athena. These get work group actions. Okay, what else can I do? Oh, these people are not letting me do anything. That's so bad. Why? I'm a company employee. So I'm going to go here to IAM. What can I do in IAM? Let me check. Nothing. Okay, so this is pretty obvious. I don't have any permissions, right? I don't have any permissions. But what if I go ahead and to this particular user, I can add a policy. Let's see here what I can add here. Our permissions to the policy, maybe attach a policy directly to this particular user, and all of a sudden, this user becomes an administrator, right? So I'm going to attach this administrator access, right? And so the user became an administrator. There's no permission user. But let me see here. I may have to log back in, log out and log back in. Let me see here. So if I click here, Athena, there I get permissions. I don't see that permission. Just is rapidly populated and I can see it in my environment already. So let me go to EC2 and see what I have here in EC2. Perfect. I get permissions. Let me go ahead and remove the permissions real quickly. You see how fast this takes effect, right? Remove policy again. And then I go back to no permissions user. I refresh the page and I should get an error somewhere here. Well, this is not, let me see here. So I may need to log back in, but this shouldn't be happening. Oh, there, here we go. You start getting errors. Let me go back to Athena where I was before because I got first permissions with Athena, and there you go. You're not authorized. You see how fast this works? How quickly this is populated? You can manipulate the permissions from there, and maybe this particular user becomes a developer. So what I have to do is attach. Do I have to attach a power user to this developer? I don't think so. I can add this user to the group's developer, right? What's the extension's name? Okay, yes, yes. The extension name is multi-account container, Alicia. Right. Well, yes, but this is for Firefox, okay? It's not in Chrome. I don't think we have, and with Isengard, I don't think we have control over the MFA for the root user. I don't think we can do that. I'm not sure about that, Alicia. And I saw you ask. You asked, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have to delete the user? What do you mean, Shamina? Is that how you pronounce your name, Shamina?
Yeah, sorry. I think that was earlier from when we were
Mm-hmm.
looking at permissions. And if someone is temporarily at a company and you
Mm-hmm.
remove them from a group and you
Mm-hmm.
assign permissions to the group, I didn't know if it was best practice to also delete the user or you just have to You don't have to delete the user.
Well, the user outside the group doesn't have the permissions, right? So, but you still have access to the console. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
Yeah.
it's best practice is to delete the user
Okay. Makes
because you
sense.
still have access to. You don't have any permissions, but you still have access to the console.
Right.
So
Right.
there's a
Okay.
password, there's a username that people can use, right? If
Yeah.
there's a way for a user to adjust their console to only display services that they do have permissions for and mostly suppress the rest, well, I don't think that's possible, Chris. I never seen that before. I don't think there's a way to do that, right? And there's no need to do that either. What usually happens is whenever you try to get access to a certain part of your account and you don't have access to it, you're gonna get an API error. That's what usually happens. I don't think there's a way to suppress that. And like I am a power user, I am doesn't show for me at all in the account, right? I may still need to see roles, right? So that makes sense. What roles are present in my account, even though I don't have the power to create a role, but I can see the roles. So I think it's good to know that because as a developer, I need to know if there's certain roles that I can use when developing, right? So that makes sense. Right? Okay, so this is a global thing. Just want to mention this: whoever is logged in, right, can see the same thing, right? As long as they have the access, right? We also have the account settings here. We have policies. Policies are permissions. Don't forget that, right? It's basically um, a JSON document that is comprised of keys and values, keys and multiple values. In this case, we have an array, which is a group of elements of the same kind, the same type, right? So we have actions here that are part of this array, right? And we have resources. This is the resource that we have the power on, right? And just for you to know that, this is just permissions that you can attach to a role, a user group, or a user. So those are identities, right? Identities. Group roles are policies are attached to identities, users, user groups, and roles, right? Okay, so any other best practices that we can follow here? Any other best practices that you can remember? Uh, so we created a group. We attached permissions to a group, a policy. We created two users. We added one user to the group, and we left the other one without any permissions, right? We saw policies. We logged in as a developer and we logged in as a no permissions user. We played we played with the permissions. We saw that the developer only has access to everything except IAM, and the other one didn't have permissions. But we attached a policy from the root from the administrator's account, and it populated the permissions real quickly, and it changed that, right? And also we went over the policy simulator, and we were able to test the policy before we ever logged in as the user, right? We can have all the credentials here. We click on here where it says my security credentials. I can have what it says here as a security best practice. We recommend MFA, right? So we can see here the IAM credentials, console login, multi-factor authentication, access keys with you shouldn't see, and signing certificates. We also have code commit credentials, just in case you want to push something to code commit. You need permissions for that, right? Remember, you need permissions for everything, right? And Amazon Key Space is credential. This is a type of database for Cassandra. Apache Cassandra compatible with that. So you need permissions for that too. So I think that that's all that I have for today. If I come here and I check on security credentials, I can see the credentials here as well, and I can have the access advisor that shows the services that these users can access and when those services will last access. and you can review this data to remove unused permissions. As you can see, this is a power user access. I have basically access to everything here. And that's it. Any questions? Any questions? I just wanted to touch on some of the things that you do with IAM that are good for the exam, because IAM is every single exam. There's no exam that you will take in any of the AWS, any type of exam, either a certification exam or an exam for a course on skills builder. You will always see IAM somewhere, somehow, right? At some point, you will see it. IAM is one of the most powerful services in AWS because it guarantees access or no access to backend resources in your AWS account.